Awesome. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the CANA Connection Podcast. I'll be your moderator today, Jack Murray. And today we'll be diving into the front lines of defense innovation. It's 2026, and the battlefield has changed from the Red Sea to the DRC. We're seeing a massive shift in how the U.S. and its allies defend against autonomous threats. Joining me today is our Director of Innovation and Strategy, Chris Cichy, and our President and CEO, Rob Cranston. Today we're going to be talking about autonomous swarms and intelligent CUAS solutions and how the government marketplace is shifting towards rapid acquisition in response. We'll be breaking down the CANA Entourage tech and its relevance to the current autonomous swarm threat. And really, to set the stage for our listeners, let's pull back the curtain on the tech itself. Chris, I'll pass it over to you to give a brief explanation of CANA's unmanned system solution called CANA Entourage.
Thanks, Jack. And that was a good setup. I mean, there's a lot going on right now that I think is creating the demand signal and proving the kind of need for a solution like Entourage. What Entourage is, it's an intelligent planning tool that will plan barriers of unmanned systems, air, land, and sea, or even subsurface, to protect an asset. That asset could be anything from like a ship wanting to defend a ship going through a strait, like say the Straits of Hormuz. It could be an aircraft in flight. It could be a piece of critical infrastructure like, say Karg Island, right? So you're seeing a lot of this play out in real life where we have an adversary launching numerous cheap, attritable systems at our assets, and we're using $1 million missile systems in response. We're using, really, really expensive laser systems in some case, RF and EW systems. And what this would allow you to do is something we can currently do, right? We would be able to take cheap and expensive drones and create a barrier with them. The problem we have right now is joint force, and the reason they're not doing this actively is the planning of that is very complex, and it would typically take, from hours for a very simple defense to, days to weeks and months. The larger you go up in scale of the area you're defending, we could defend something like, say, naval headquarters in Bahrain, something of that size in minutes, right? And plan the defense and the scheduling, the execution of that in minutes. Whereas it would take a significant amount of time. You couldn't do it in an ATO cycle currently, and not where you're factoring in all of the different factors that we're able to factor in. And I think that's really the key, right? It's intelligent. It'll run thousands and thousands of simulations in seconds, and it learns from each simulation. So in more technical terms, you hear the word optimization thrown out, right? And that might not mean things to a lot of people, but in this case, it really just means finding the optimal solution. And what that means is in terms of effect versus cost. Cost is a big thing in this whole equation. Effect could be something like the probability of raid annihilation. It's a more analytical term for how likely you are to successfully defend the asset, right? So I've got the probability of successful defense versus how much it costs to create the drone barriers and keep them flying and, everything that goes into that. So you'll find this, kind of scatter plot of effect versus cost. So in this case, I might be 98% probability of successfully defending that asset, or successfully intercepting, successfully detecting, whatever we put in for criteria for success. But that particular 98% solution costs $1 billion, right? When we got this one over here, it's 90% probability and it costs $1 million, right? So this can inform decision making and enable, more informed quantitative decisions for acquisitions, for planning. You can really run the gamut with what we can do with this capability.
Yeah, we know Entourage is a powerful capability, right, and covers many domains. But in our world today, what you have is only half the battle. The other half is how the government can buy it. And CANA Entourage was recently deemed awardable on the Tradewinds Solution Marketplace. For those unfamiliar with the Tradewinds Solution Marketplace and its rigorous vetting process, what does this designation actually signal to DoD customers regarding our solution's maturity?
Well, we know what they're intending to signal, and it's really a matter of is the government going to be able to advertise to itself in the right way, right? What they're trying to do is create like an Amazon for DoD, because we all know, you've been hearing for a long time that the acquisition process is broken. which is, a little bit ironic because everyone's crying right now because we're breaking the acquisition system and redoing it, right? And this is really part of that. They're creating these Amazon-like marketplaces where they vet the things that are hung on there. In some cases, some of these marketplaces have a contract vehicle. And really, all you would do is if I'm a government customer, I MIPR money over to your contract vehicle. They put it on the contract and it comes to, like, say, a CANA in the form of a task order, right? And that's how some of these marketplaces are working. With Tradewinds, they vet the solution and they say, this is not only something that the Joint Force needs, this is something we think is in the right stage of development and is primed for you to rapidly acquire using your own contract vehicle, government customer. And it creates this clearinghouse of all of the solutions that they think everyone's asking for in one place so that anyone else looking for a solution can now go there, understand that CANA's solution on the Tradewinds marketplace is ready to go, and they can push it rapidly through their contracting office using one of these new vehicles. I shouldn't say new vehicles, newly emphasized vehicles like CSOs and different kinds of OTAs that they're really pushing to be the means of how they're going to do this rapid acquisition, right? It can't move at the same pace with the traditional FAR, and there's not enough political capital at the moment to completely rewrite the FAR. So, it's an administration way and it's a department way of doing kind of an end around so that they can get the capabilities in the warfighter's hands sooner. And we're now in a great position for potential customers to be able to get Entourage in a hurry thanks to the Tradewinds marketplace.
No, that was a great overview. And I kind of want to pivot over to Rob on the customer side of that equation. Like Chris was mentioning, Tradewinds is part of a broader push for rapid acquisition. Now, how does having Entourage or any other solution on the shelf in this marketplace change that conversation with the government POC compared to any traditional base procurement cycle conversations that you have out there?
Yeah, Chris covered it. I mean, in a lot of ways, and which is exactly the intention in defining rapid acquisition, whereby which there have been rapid acquisition type of structures around Department of War. The factory to foxhole traditional method and had several types of sequenced ways of getting product to warfighters quickly. But now what you're seeing is a lot of that middle layer where products today have got to be at above an MVP and IL5 and above. And that is really important for the viewers out there, listeners. It's so critical that to understand that inside the marketplaces. So in other words, the traditional R&D space, which had, again, a lot of build out and a lot of successful failures in that the government wants to do that so that it can get a product solution correct or as correct from fielding as they can. So what we're seeing is a lot of that middle layer of time now compressed. So your time and compression of getting product to delivery. And that's a good pressure on what are emerging companies and companies like CANA who are more mature that have fielded and have experience in getting products to program of record. So yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting, but it's also daunting because how much of the contracting community have been trained on this? And so we don't know. And so there's some inconsistencies right now of how fast some of these contracting agencies are moving into these marketplaces or use of marketplaces to get product to field. So Jack, back to you now.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's great. We're seeing that, a fundamental shift from, like we've discussed, buying platforms, buying capabilities, and using this quick, rapid acquisition. You broke down what it means for a small business like CANA trying to integrate digital tools into these existing military hardware, and other programs. But it feels like what we've been talking about is that the old way of doing things is being completely rewritten, and that's what Chris mentioned. With a bunch of these marketplaces popping up, we know that there's other ones outside of Tradewinds. Do we see this continuing, or do we see some, extracting and contracting as we move forward in 2026 and beyond?
Well, I'll swing at this first. I think it's unknown. Whenever you have a new place, right, that place being the marketplace, and where contracting is still have its boundaries of FAR requirements, you know, we don't know yet. I think what we're going to find is it's going to be on industry to make sure it brings its clients into the marketplace. Because that recognition right now is in a contractual, it's out into industry. But I would say that even more so, again, having your clients, our clients, that are educated on how the marketplace contractually works. So I think there's an unknown. We've got a sledgehammer right now to the acquisition system. We got a sledgehammer to these innovation platforms that executive staff, executive down is placing on the Department of War, and we'll see how that ripple effect really plays out.
Yeah, I kind of go along with that, especially in that I think there is really good push towards industry with these marketplaces. We're hearing about this out here on the industry side. When I speak to people on the government acquisition side, I don't think, and this kind of goes back to my earlier comment, is whether the government can advertise to the government. A lot of the acquisition professionals that are not right at that marketplace entity are unaware of it, right? They're not doing the best job with some of the acquisition community advertising this marketplace exists. So you have quite a few entities standing up marketplaces like we discussed. And without a little bit of advertising and education, maybe through something like Defense Acquisition University, and maybe a little bit of structure, they're not going to know where to go for looking for their solution. For example, Tradewinds. Tradewinds is very focused on AI solutions and SaaS type solutions, as it should, being part of the CDAO. But if you're on the acquisition side and you don't know that, how are you going to know to go to that marketplace to look for the solutions you need? So there's going to need to be some education, maybe a little structure. And I think that structure may eventually lead to a little bit of contraction where, initially everybody stands up a marketplace and we're all gung ho. Some of them are going to be successful, some will not. And eventually some of the redundancy may get peeled back, a little bit more structure. Again, it'll become part of the education curriculum for the acquisition professionals so they know where to look. But yeah, definitely a good push. And I think that's the only way to do it. Make an omelet, you got to break some eggs, and they broke all the eggs. So now we got to put this omelet together and see if it's good.
That's right.
Great analogy there. We've talked about the process. We've talked about the recent shift in acquisition. We've talked about Entourage, but really the urgency of this transition is really driven by what we're seeing in the theater right now. We're currently seeing an unprecedented volume of one-way attack drones in the Middle East and sub-Saharan Africa. How does Entourage really help, boots on the ground decide in seconds where to place their drone screen to intercept these threats before they reach, a high-value unit?
Without diving too much into the technical, right? So what Entourage does, that is similar to the traditional handway, right? It has all of the parameters of the blue systems, the friendly systems. It has the parameters that are known of the threat systems, and the simplest optimizations, the simplest, like where do we put it, has to do with ranges, right? So I have the range that the thing can traverse and come back without crashing, and I have the range its sensors and weapons leave. And that's the super simplest type of optimization. Those type of optimization can be done relatively quickly. However, just like the gas mileage on your vehicle, that was developed and advertised from the manufacturer in a laboratory, and they're always going to give you their best case scenario, right? So there's how it actually impacts when it burns more energy on takeoff, when the terrain and the elevation from the ground actually changes the gas mileage of an aircraft or an unmanned aircraft, in this case. How wind resistance affects unmanned systems, which is significantly different from a manned aircraft, right? Wind on a quadcopter, as you can imagine, is a lot bigger deal than it is on an F-35, right? So this takes all of these real world variables, more than, a human is going to be able to figure out and balance each one off each other in real time. And then it adds scale. that is normally just not available at this tactical level. If I'm the guy boots on the ground, I'm going, the box said this thing can fly for 30 minutes. The range of this radio that I'm controlling it with says about a kilometer. Let me draw it on my map around my EAB real quick. I can only fly this thing out about half a click, 500 meters. So I'm going to push OPs over here and I'm going to fly it in a circle because that's all I can figure out right now. And that's their defense. And that's why there's no drone barrier for the boots on the ground. It's wait till I see something and hope I can fly this FPV drone into it before it blows me up. This would allow you to have all of those things preloaded, all of the assets that I have, all the threats that are known, go, this is my location, this is the area I want to defend. I hit the little button, boop, and now I've got exactly the combination of drones, the combination of platform and payload, the order that I fly them in, the recommended routing, right? So I can integrate an actual defense. And it even lets you integrate with point defenses, right? So if I have things like a directed energy weapon system, I've got the machine gun that now has the specialized rounds that create shrapnel to take out drones. You know, I can place all these things in an optimal position, and it'll really inform where I put my point defenses, where I put my barriers, and create an integrated, almost combined arms effect in multiple domains. It's not just aircraft. Everyone's really focused on the unmanned aircraft at the moment because that's probably the quantity-wise the biggest threat that we're seeing. But I mean, there was an attack of a USV on I think it was a Saudi oil platform the other day. We saw in the Black Sea, you know, the Ukrainians sank capital ships with unmanned surface vessels and UUVs, right? So while you're not seeing quite the quantity of the attacks, this threat is multi-domain. This threat is heterogeneous. The only thing that's keeping large heterogeneous swarms from being a reality at the moment is something like Entourage on the offensive side. And that's something CANA is already solving for. You know, we've built what we have right now, this intelligent planning system, off the backbone of a previous, Navy Research Lab effort, something called Dreamcatcher, that does similar work on the offensive side, right? So this is fully capable. This is this is very, very cutting edge what we're doing. And in some cases, this is maybe even a little bit ahead of its time. We're able to plan defenses for systems that they don't even have yet. But we could tell them what systems they need to buy if they really want to defend themselves cheaply from these threats.
I just want to hit on a really important part what Chris was mentioning is, and that is, and in the question is the speed, from seconds of information. What is more important, really important, is that data and workflow that's coming from the tactical decision making, as Chris was talking about, and into what becomes repositories and ability to get information and data sets on adversarial drone information that we can help warfighter decision makers really make planning decisions on what becomes next steps for that could affect different types of war plans and or other going into that. So that's a critical part right now of information in the newer battlefield that we're seeing, is that data sets coming from out of the tactical counter UAS type of adversarial protection. So yeah, it's good. So again, going into a formation right now with a lot of companies that have a lot production of assets and speed of getting those assets into the tactical operating units. That's a big question mark right now, and we certainly see that as something that in the future we're gonna have to help connect the dots, and an Entourage tool can do that.
I think you're going to see a shift towards a much more automated battlefield, and I think it has to be. You know, there's some recent fallout with around the discussion of autonomous weapon systems, right? But when we look at what our adversaries are doing, you know, some of our main competitors, they're very focused on everything being done at machine speed. In some cases, it's their leadership in form of government maybe not having as much trust in the military. In some cases, it's their view on things like collateral damage might be very different from ours. But if you took all of that out, you just look at something like the advent of hypersonic weapons and unmanned systems, right? These unmanned systems can make decisions at machine speed. Hypersonic weapons, in order to defend against them, you could maybe defend against an individual hypersonic weapon at human speed, but if I've got more than one coming in, you're not able to make decisions fast enough before it strikes you, right? So things like Entourage are just the first kind of step on that road. Completing that entire data flow that Rob just described, I think we're going to end up having to make some hard decisions on when we want to have the human in the loop and when we want a system that, when we say so, when the situation, dictates, we hit the button, right? Broken arrow or whatever we're going to call it, and it just fights at machine speed until that situation is done. You used to see this in, more global war on terror times. We would have something called the troops in contact. And troops in contact suspended certain rules of engagement because we were really decisively engaged, and we were able to make decisions faster with less approval. You're going to start seeing that in the automation, and these tools like Entourage are going to have to be in place, right? And they're going to have to be connected. We're going to have data flow from something like a pre-planning intelligent tool like Entourage to the execution tools, to the assessment tools and sensors. And there's going to be this feedback loop that we will have a human in the loop, an operator in the loop under steady state operations, but we're going to have to complete that loop for the scenario where the machines have to fight at machine speeds because they're fighting other machines.
Oh, that's awesome. And I mean, one more technical question about Entourage just to help paint the full picture. We've talked about how it supports multi-domain. We've talked about the current cost curve and the speed. That's not all. It's also about agility. We're seeing recent drone-led strikes on command centers in the DRC. It's clear that moving barrier defenses are needed. And I know we've built that into Entourage. Chris, could you talk about how Entourage can support that moving barrier defense for convoys or carrier strike groups that
absolutely
constantly
so
in motion?
the defended asset, right? The high value unit, kind of depending on what service is, how you're going to term that thing that is you're protecting. It can be something static. It can be something large as an installation, port facility, all the way down to technically you could build it off a person. I need to protect Rob, and we're going to develop barriers around Rob, right? But if Rob starts moving, you can still do that. So that really opens up a lot of possibilities, right? So we've got the very simple. I've got a ship or a convoy of ships moving through the Straits of Hormuz, right? To keep it with current terms. But I could defend things like oil tankers, right? I could defend a aerial refueler, right? So normally when I have aerial refueling operations, and we recently, unfortunately lost one, there are manned aviation flying what they call combat air patrols around that oil tanker track to protect it while it's up there, because that is a very important piece. Everything else runs out of gas if that one link comes out of the sky, right? The adversary could start attacking those with unmanned systems and missile systems, right? And again, we lose one F-35, that's a very, very expensive proposition. But if I'm able to defend that with unmanned systems, now I have a very lot of value added. If you start looking at things like SOP operations, and this is something I've spoken to quite a few folks over at SOCOM, when they go in, if you don't have any perspective with SOCOM operations, they're out very much alone, and a lot of times there's not the same support for conventional assets. Everyone always thinks SOF has all the support in the world. Yes and no. They have priority, but where they operate is different. So if you just think to like Black Hawk Down, to give it a movie reference, you're coming in with these little birds, right? You may have some Apache gunships, you may not, in escort, and you've got priority over close air support assets that are really far away. You could now defend that ingress against things like the RPG threat, the man-pad threat, even small arms fire with barriers of small drones that are moving with the helicopter. While you could do this with a person, the drones very obviously don't fly as fast as a helicopter, especially a helicopter on ingress. So these would have to be pre-planned to the point where they're flying ahead of the route and peeling off. And these are moving barriers that are predicting the route and how to defend it along, its trajectory in. So now I've got these barriers that the machine is now planning at machine speed, gave you all the scheduling and all the routing, and it's going into ingress. They get on the ground, and now those drone barriers move to defending the objective area. So now I have barriers of drones defending that objective area for the very small force that is focused inwards and not as much on the kind of that outer cordon, right? So now they're protecting them on objective. They seize the objective, and they need to hold it maybe now for until reinforcements come. Now I can transition into more of a steady state where there's other unmanned assets helping them defend until conventional forces can now relieve them in place on that objective and they can peel out. So, you're opening up things that are just not possible, even though we would like to do them right now with current technology. Like a human is really going to struggle. We would take 6 months to a year to plan something like I just described using manual means.
No, that is really, really amazing insight. Thank you for that, Chris. Is there anything else that Chris, you or Rob, you want to discuss or highlight today on the topics we've discussed?
You did mention platform-centric versus capability-centric, and I don't know if Rob had any thoughts on that, but I know I have seen a departure, right, from the way the government has previously, even when I was in government kind of towards the end of my military career, working in requirements and acquisitions, where words like vendor lock were poison, right? So what I think they mean by platform-centric versus capability-centric, if I wanted to conduct counter-UAS operations in the past using traditional acquisition means and the traditional way of structuring, I would have a solicitation, eventually a contract, and a program of record for the interceptor, for the ground-based interceptor, for the C2 program of record. And these would all be separate things, acquired separately, managed under separate project offices that didn't talk to each other very well. And all of that, because it's all done separately, is more costly and takes more time. But it was in many ways to avoid vendor lock and being stuck with one commercial supplier that now has a lot of leverage over me, the government. I think they've accepted a little bit of poison to get to the good part, right? In that they are now looking, and we saw this recently with, I guess I'll leave it out of there, but there was a solicitation that was looking for counter-UAS as a service. And it listed every element of the counter-UAS capability that I just mentioned in one contract. And they're saying either big company get together or, propose, or a bunch of little companies, you better band up because we're not accepting this best of breed. We're contracting as a service. And they're really looking for that. I think that's a departure from the way they previously did a lot of things or looked. They're also removing a lot of the set-asides. You're seeing a lot more push towards open and free competition. We'll take anybody, but we want it ready and we want it now. So it's, on one hand, it's removing what used to be maybe a leg up for some people, but it's opening doors to a lot of direct commercial application that I think this new messaging is going to bring new people to the marketplace that is the government that may have been afraid to come this way before, because there was so much, bureaucracy and nepotism, if you will, with the traditional defense contractors that if you didn't know how to navigate that, it was very intimidating. And now they're just like, it's out the window. Whoever's got the best product and can give it to me now, we'll take it and we'll figure it out later. So yeah, I don't know if you're seeing something similar, Rob.
Yeah, this is where it's getting really, in a way, complicated for small business to understand its navigational path of what is a first 1 through 3 SBIR, STTR, SITR type of funding, and pulling through that type of contract negotiation and then product to warfighter, is that companies have got to be really, really solvent. Small businesses have got to be really comfortable and trained and understanding how their working cap inside building a component of a product line that's going to go into a federal space. Whereas before, the phase 1, phase 2s in the SBI or STTR program had a lot of competition. They're now going to scrutinize that with more so mature technology, or that company's maturity is going to be more in evaluation, is going to have a lot more they're going to de-risk as much as they can startups. And it's unfortunate. But this is the way crazy. This is how I think you're going to see a lot of these contract structures, this meeting in the middle of deliverables, once again, that are going to be a lot more scrutinized on the small business and or any business in that first year of whether or not they're going to get funded the next year. And, oh, by the way, there's going to be more equities that industry has to put into that will require a capital investment. So that's the piece that we're looking at. And Chris does that really well for us and the rest of our team at CANA in terms of, hey, how are we de-risking that cost as we build what is a commercialization plan on a product development customized for a federal or for what is a Department of War client. So yeah, that's just some.
I think it's a very exciting time. It's a very scary time. Being kind of a cynical person. For years, watching everyone, the system is broken, and now they broke it. Watching everyone clutch their pearls in fear has been a little bit.
It's crazy because that's right. I mean, and then you've got like a funding bogey and an authorization of 2026 right now, where the spigots are kind of just starting to be turned on, and we're like, holy cow, that's going to go into now and everybody's going to, where do I spend it? How do I spend it?
Yeah. It's all uncharted waters, I think, and some of it's going to be good, some of it's going to be bad, but nothing else. It's not boring. So get your popcorn.
I know, we did talk in really kind of context and won't get into deep, but as far as the contract structure, it's not like SBI, STTR, which again, the executive flow down of where they're looking in terms of innovation, incubation, and build out quickly, also includes OTs, right? The OTA platform. We know that, we see that, we're really responding to, and we're part of a sequence of OTAs that you're starting to see, once again, the task orders, RFIs come out of those. So that's good. And that's, once again, gets to speed to delivery, speed to contracting. So. Well, so let me get the hand over to Chris, because that's the knit to from factory drone manufacturing to it's a tough sequence because it's a different product set in a way.
Yeah, I think there's a natural inclination to go that way, just due to the capability, not necessarily just from this push towards capability centric versus platform centric. Right now, what we have is a standalone tool that is capable of being integrated, and it's built from the ground up to be integrated, right? But what that gives you is redundancy. The capabilities of the tool itself, we talked about all of this intelligent planning, kind of real time, operational, tactical, but the outputs can inform not just decisions of how to operate, but decisions of what to buy, right, or how to design your equipment to meet kind of the use case of your customer, right? So it takes a portfolio look. So if I, as an OEM, am looking at doing business with the Navy, we could do a run with all of the current Navy unmanned systems alone in a given scenario, and then add the system that OEM has, right? The parameters of that system, right? Its range, its speed, its whatever. And you can show quantitative value with what they currently have. And then you could manipulate things like range, speed, sensor capability, all these other things to get to what would be the best fit with your customer's existing systems. So now not only do you have informed design, you have built-in quantifiable hard metrics for marketing when you go to sell it as another OEM. So, we can work with everything from manufacturers, right, to kind of third-party vendors of the unmanned systems, of the interceptors, of the software, C2 software, right? We're really agnostic in a way that if anyone is looking to put together counter UAS capability for the DOW, for the DOJ, DHS, even for commercial type entities that are looking to protect their shipping or their critical infrastructure, we're ready to go. We're ready to partner, and we're actively looking.
Okay, so that's good. That back end, the first part of that, Chris, you got to be careful because a lot of what's baked into as you know, the maintenance or sustainment or platforms that are already that are being paid for by the government.
Mhm.
We're not trying to replace that. So an OEM that's got their tech stack, right, that's built on the product, that's managed the command control. Just I would say that what we're trying to do is we're being an integrator inside that environment.
Yeah.
That can come off maybe as a way that, again, they're already, most of the OEMs have, as we know, right? Like SNCO, they already have their command control platform.
Yeah. They have a command and control platform. And in some ways, it's not really fully the C3, the C4, that it looks like, right? They're able to visualize assets. There are very few platforms that can do any kind of control and tasking in unmanned systems, and the ones that can, for the most part, only talk to the systems of the same proprietary vendor as the software, right? Very few of them have a planning capability, and if they do, it's the rudimentary kind of like range ring type planning. The assets go this far, therefore this is where you should place them. We can work with an existing C2, C3, C4 platform and provide them a capability that, as far as we've been able to tell, nobody else has. We can do it without them having to change much in the way, because we've developed it from the ground up to have a common message format, common API formatting, easy to work with code. We can work as a plugin. We've even proposed becoming an ATAC plugin for the operator on the ground, as one form. We take very little compute. We're not going to change the compute requirements of your system. You're not all of a sudden going to need a supercomputer to run your system. We're streamlined and optimized for very low compute requirements for anything but a super strategic scenario.
Okay, so one of the things we want to hit on, and really important, as Chris has driven us into the marketplace, as we mentioned, we talked through, is this partnership piece. And we're looking for partners. We're looking from small to large to integrate not just Entourage, but also as a measure of data and how that data is discussed from a tactical into a strategic operational level. So as you companies out there that are looking for partners, either to get into this space, or you've got a mature technology right now that you want to go into an SBIR, STTR with us, we've got academic partners, and really we want to continue to build our consortium to make sure there's a win-win for everybody.
Awesome. Well, we've covered the what, why, and how. If someone listening needs a capability like Entourage, what's the fastest path for them to get it in their hands, or who can they reach out to get some more information?
I think the fastest way to get it in their hands right now would be just reaching out to us. We have a variety of contract vehicles and means to maybe go ahead and do this for a direct government customer. Obviously, we're open to commercial sales as far as licensing or services. That's something we can do for business to business, other OEMs, things like that. But I don't think there's one particular easy button. We have several easy buttons, fortunately, at the moment. So the fastest way is just reach out and ask, hey, I'm interested. What can you tell me about that, and how do I get it?
That would be Cichy at CANA LLC.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Or Jay Murray at
Yes.
CANA LLC.
Yes.
How about that?
QR code at the end of the video.
That's right.
Yeah, right? Awesome. Well, it's time to wrap up. So it's clear from our conversation today, landscape of 2026 demands more than just the tech. It really demands a fundamental shift in acquisition here. Having Entourage ready and awardable on the Tradewinds marketplace is one of those easy buttons, and it means that we aren't just talking about future solutions, we are delivering them now. So thank you, Chris and Rob, for the insight. Thank you to those who listen, and we'll see you next time on the CANA Connection Podcast.
That was great. Thanks, Jack.
Thanks for having us.